I'm Danica Patrick, and I'm pretty intense.
I'm incredibly optimistic that the Ending Arbitration Act of Sexual Harassment is going to pass, which will give women the voice that they need to not be forced into that secret chamber of arbitration. I really feel it's like the final part of the tipping point of the revolution, because when you leave the power dynamic like this, where you have the perpetrator with the hand way up high, because the woman's down here because he knows she's silenced, right? But you suddenly give her a voice, and look what happens. Now she's up on the same playing field. And that changes the entire dynamic within the workplace. Yeah. It might even encourage this person to not sexually harass to begin with. Right. So I think it's a crucial part of this equation. And by the way, my bill is bipartisan because after covering politics for almost 30 years, I realize that unless it is bipartisan, it's never going to pass. Right. So the scope is very limited. It's small. It's enough for Republicans who tend to not be in favor of this to get on board. I have a bipartisan coalition in the House and in the Senate, and I remain incredibly optimistic that we're going to get this done for women.
What is the downside to why it wouldn't be passed?
Oh gosh. We have organizations like the National Retail Association and the Chamber of Commerce working against us because they feel that it will open up the floodgates for frivolous lawsuits. But the beauty of my bill is that it's only about harassment. Yeah. It's only about harassment. So unless you have stuff to cover up, why are you against it?
Yeah, I agree. What advice would you have for women that might be, or a man who might be in a scenario where they are uncomfortable? And in my mind, that's the great question, is what's the line? When is the line crossed? And so number one, how do you know when the line is crossed? And then what is your advice if you really feel like it has been?
So there are two forms of sexual harassment in the workplace. One's pretty easy to discern. It's quid pro quo. I've been hearing a lot about that in the real world with politics, but it essentially means, sleep with me for the promotion or you're fired. And you'd be surprised how much that still goes on. That obvious. A woman reached out to me who I included in my book, who simply asked for a promotion in radio, and her boss just 2 years ago asked her to get up on the desk and spread them.
Was he joking?
Nope.
Or like, was this a
nope.
This is a real question?
Oh no, and that is a typical story that I hear. There's no gray in any of that. That's pretty black and white. That's quid pro quo. The other definition of sexual harassment is a hostile work environment, and that's where subjectivity comes in. Because what I might think is hostile, you might not. So if there's an off-color joke, or there's a, hey, I really like your boobs in that dress, we know that's wrong, right? But some person might not be offended by that, but another person might.
Right.
So that's where the issue is allowed to become more difficult, because now you have people saying things like, well, I can't even compliment a woman on her blue dress. And I say to that, no, you can still say, hey, I like your hair, or I like your dress. Nobody's going to sue you over that. It's kind of a cop-out. As long as these really incredibly horrible things are still happening and being said to women, I don't think we should worry so much about the subjective nature of it, because the quid pro quo stuff is going on every single day in a ton of workplaces. And that's why we need to continue the national dialogue about it, because we need to hold people accountable for this kind of behavior and take away the myths that have surrounded this and subjugated women and kept them down for so long, where they didn't feel like they could speak up. Because what happens to them when they do? They're promptly blacklisted, demoted, and fired.